So we're going to do a focus on parrot finches, and that's just a slideshow that's going to run in the background that shows you all the numerous species of parrot finch. And we've got the cameraman back, so he's going to record this. Hey, here he is, Mr. Cameraman. There you go. So Ben, I think you're going to come up and sit in one of those chairs. I think who else did? I can't remember. Is Joe coming up? Who else was there's Ivan told me there are at least 3 people that he'd rung and who'd volunteered to come up and be questioned about parrot finches. So Ben's going to be one of them. Oh, David, thank you. So do you want to come and take a seat, David? And Ben, come and take a seat up here. And I've already told Jason he's got to sit there as well. But was there somebody else who volunteered? Anyway, Ben, stand up. Come and sit. Jason, come and sit here. And I'm going to grab the other microphone to give to you guys. Right. Thank you. So we've got David Boyd, Jason Holmes, and Ben. Perhaps you want to just go along and just tell everyone who you are, first of all.
You've just done it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, you know, perhaps a little more than your name.
David Boyd. I've got an aviary set up in Leppington, and I breed quite a variety of birds. Included in that is the blue face and the tri-coloured parrot finch.
Jason Holmes, had parrot finches for probably 20 years, 25 years. Currently got tricolours at the moment, and that is all on parrot finches, but bred a variety of finches over the years.
Ben Lloyd, currently breed pure red-faced parroties.
Thank you. I think there's a total of 14 species of parrot finch, but they're running they're zipping through on the screen behind. So you may be able to see that if Justin goes online, if he sort of shows that. As far as I'm aware, the only, well, perhaps there's 4 species actually in Australia at the moment. I believe there are some pin-tailed parrot finches somewhere. And there's certainly lots of red-faced parrot finches, including 2 main mutations, a sea green and a pied, and obviously combinations of those 2. There's also blue-faced parrot finches, which I'm reliably told are not the Australian subspecies. They're from Southeast Asia. And then there's ones that are on the screen now, what we call tricoloured parrot finches, but also called forbs and town bars. So I guess we're going to focus on the 3, the red-faced or red-throated, the blue face, and the tricoloured. So maybe what should we do? Do you want to start on? Do you want to start on? Oh yeah, there are some mutations. Sorry, and there's a Lutino blue face as well, which I've got a picture of. Well, do you want to tell about the mutations for the tricolours?
Right, from what I know, tricolours, there's a dilute, and there's a black-eyed yellow, I think they call them. And from what I understand, the black-eyed yellow are very weak and don't normally reproduce. But there are a few dilutes around.
In fact, those who've been around in this club for a little while would know Stanley Guest has some dilutes, doesn't he? I remember seeing not so long ago. Ben was with me too. Any other mutations? There's the Lutino blue face that's now becoming a bit more common again. I believe there were problems in terms of, you know, being in the sun and eye issues and sort of going blind, but that doesn't seem to be the case so much, I believe, with the current ones. Is that right?
If you're talking blue face mutations, I know of a pied, obviously Lutino. There is a olive colour too, not very common in Australia, but they're out there. Yeah, grizzle.
Bob's just saying there's also a grizzle in the blue face. I've not seen it. Oh, interesting. Is it still around? Still around apparently. And yeah, butt in. The idea is that everybody talks. So, but if you want to butt in, just catch my eye and I'll shove the microphone in your face. So do you want to go through the, you know, yeah? Oh, you got more mutations you can think of? Okay, red face.
So obviously you got your pied, you got your sea green. US, I think, Bob, they got the Latino, but it's like a black-eyed. What was that, Joe? Yeah, Europe, yeah, which we don't have here, right?
You know, anything, just Bob was going to say something.
No, I wasn't.
Oh, well, he was going to say, no, I wasn't. Joe said something though. Hang on, just so people can hear.
What I just said is there's a Latino one in America and Europe, which we haven't got here yet.
So apparently Latino as well. Hang on, Bob is going to say something.
There's also a Parrot blue, which has got like a yellow mask, a salmon yellow mask instead of the orange. There's a few people working on it. It's seems to have the same thing as a sea green. So it's recessive, I think. Sex linked, is it? Okay. But there's one lady that's working on them quite successfully, actually.
Oh, this is in Australia. I thought you were saying, oh,
Yeah.
very good. Any other comments on mutations? You aware of any, Mick? Hang on. Tell everyone. We're talking about the red throats. Yeah, maybe the inheritance of them. Hang on, Joe's just going to say something.
The pieds are a dominant bird. So whether you put a pied cock to a normal hen or a pied hen to a normal cock, you will breed pieds, hens and cocks. But the funny thing about it is you can put two pieds together and you'll breed a normal green bird. How that works, I've got no idea, but it does happen. I've seen a nest of 4 out of 4 come out all green.
Well, I guess because it's dominant, it's almost like the pied is split to the normal. So if you put two single factor pieds together, you know, they're both carrying the normal gene, aren't they? So you're going to get 25, could get 25% normal. Yeah, won't breed any pieds. No, that's right. Yeah. So if it's a pied, it's always visual, which makes things a little bit simpler, doesn't it? If there's no pied, but it only takes one feather, doesn't it, to be a pied? Sorry, Paul.
A co-dominant gene, not a dominant gene. So you can breed normals from pieds. You can put two pieds up and breed normals. You put a pied up to a normal, you'll breed some pieds, some normals, and the normals are just straight out normal. So it's co-dominant, not dominant.
But can you have a double factor then? If you had a double factor pied, would you breed all? No, it doesn't work that way. Okay. The other thing I've been told with the pieds, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never had, I'm not a fan of pieds to be honest, but I believe that they become more and more yellow in this case as they get older. So there was a sort of a trend, and I think we even argued about it with our price guide that, you know, that more heavily pied birds are worth more money, whereas in actual fact, potentially buying old birds by buying them. Is that true, do you reckon? Joe's saying no, because he sells a lot of them, doesn't he?
No, these days they're molting out first molt and they're coming out 90% yellow straight off the bat.
Okay, well, just cross out what I just said then. I was wrong. Hang on, Paul's saying something.
The nest green. You can tell the pieds will have a pure yellow beak, while the ones which are going to be normal or real light pieds will have a bit of black on the beak as well. So, yeah, but the majority of times they improve with age. You can get some these days what are really good pieds when they, you know, after that first molt. I've found now in the last few years, I breed some with white flights, while going back 20 years ago, they didn't have white flights or yellow flights, whatever was the case. But they've certainly improved them.
So is the light beak the best way to tell that can you see that it's a light beak even in the nest? So even if they haven't got a yellow feather or a white feather, the beak is the way to tell that it's carrying the pied. Oh, yeah. Anybody else on mutations? No. All good. Can't think of any others at this point in time. So what do you want to do next, Jason? Talk about the behaviour in the aviaries?
Those 3 species we just spoke about, they will crossbreed within each other. So quite readily, like blues will cross with reds and tricolours will cross with everything. And so if you're a novice, if you're new, don't mix the species.
Yes, so keep all the, and I presume that's the same with the other parrot finch species. Yeah. I mean, I've bred a lot of tri-coloured parrot finches and in the past blue-faced parrot finches. I've for some reason never had red-throated, although Ben's giving me some apparently, I believe. But I would imagine the blue-faced parrot finch cock is likely to have a mount anything that moves. Basically, they never stop, and they're charging around like lunatics in the aviary. And I would imagine, you know, any finch, but certainly a parrot finch would be fair game. I imagine. Paul.
That's right when you say that, but I was breeding Lutino once years ago, and a lot of the normal cocks wouldn't mate with the hens, Lutinos. And I bred some Lutino cocks once and could never breed off them. None of the hens would go near them. They just ignored them. They thought they were ugly.
And is there ever a problem with them feeding Lutino young in the nest, I wonder? Because sometimes, you'd think if they didn't like them as mates, they'd see them as foreign in the nest, wouldn't you? Yeah. Yeah, so Joe at the back's just saying that he's sort of that view that could happen. Hang on, why don't I give you the microphone? We're still on Lutino Blueface, are we? Yeah.
The Lutinos I've got 2 pairs in the cage. I've got a Lutino cock with a normal hen and a Lutino hen with a split cock. I've just paired them up now, but they're in cages.
That's good to get them going. So being a Lutino, of course, maybe we'll just talk about the genetics quickly. Obviously sex linked. So if you've got a cock Lutino, all the hens are going to be Lutinos, and all that you breed, and all the cocks that, assuming you put it to a normal hen, and all the cocks are going to be splits. So even with a split cock, you can get half hens would be Lutino and half the cocks would be splits. Is that correct? So sex link's a little bit of a messy one, at least when they're whatever. At least when with the co-dominant that Paul was talking about with the pieds, it's either pied or it isn't. So, you know, life's a little simpler. If you want to get rid of them, just get rid of all the pieds and you're back to normals. But with sex linked and of course recessive, you can end up with all sorts of stuff. So do you know the genetics of the other mutations, David? Oh, okay. Oh, good. So we'll get on to David once we get to diet and whatever else, husbandry and so on. I'm not really sure. Is this? I'm suspecting the Seagrain's sex linked as well, but I might be wrong.
Can I make a point? You said 50% will be that, 50% will be, not necessarily. You can get all of them one or the
Of course, yeah. But if you bred an infinite number from that pair,
then you're more likely to get, yes.
You'd get infinities divided by 2 of each. It's sex linked as well, is it? Yeah. And the pied, of course, we got co-dominant. The Lutino is what do we say? Sex linked. Yeah. So we had enough of mutations here. I have, and I think David has as well. By the sound of it.
Ben's going to talk to us about breeding.
Yeah.
Breeding what? All right. There's a lot of mutations out there, and it's getting a lot harder to find pure birds.
Ben, just hold it up closer. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, getting very, very hard to get pure strains without getting a white feather in it. There's a few breeders now that are focusing on getting pure stock back out there, and now I'm one of them. So I had a bit of a hunt around and found a breeder that I managed to source 3 pairs of pure red-faced out of, and I keep them as a colony. I've had them in the past as singles and had a little bit of success, but I found I've had greater success running them as a colony. So far since September, 3 pairs have already produced 52 young. They just go non-stop. I keep them as 3 pairs, 1 aviary only, and seem to do quite well in them. That is a 3 metre by 3 metre square aviary.
Yeah, and what else have you got in with them, Ben? Some people say they're quite aggressive. all
Yeah,
parrot
I
finches?
have got a pair of plumheads in there and they haven't bred. So they will be coming out this week. I have got one cockbird in there that does tend to flog a lot of the young ones. Last year he was plucking heads, and this year he's doing heads and tail feathers. So I've just got to isolate him as well. But other than that, obviously no aggression to the parents, no aggression to other species. But yeah, just the plumheads aren't breeding.
And, yeah, okay. Yeah, you go, just.
What sort of nest receptacles are your birds breeding, Ben?
I give mine a variety. I've got cane baskets, I've got boxes, I've got natural brush, and they seem to prefer the brush, and all three pairs will go to one nesting receptacle. They use a variety of material, but they really love emu feathers. You've really got to pluck an emu at the start of the year, and he may last a couple of months.
What heights do they nest at?
Heights vary. Mine seem this year to be nesting at a mid-level. I have got boxes at high, which they've used last year. But for some reason this year, they seem to be breeding all at a mid-height. But I give them a variety of nesting options. It's just wherever they want to go. Feed them water. Look, I feed mine your basic seed mix or finch mix. I give them a soak mix with naturally for birds micronutrients in it. I feed them frozen green seed. I've got my own soft food mix, which I give them, and they absolutely devour it. Obviously, normal greens, cucumber, frozen veg. The fit grit, it gets smashed in a week. Cuttle bone, charcoal, your normal staple diet. They are fed maggots. They do get the occasional mealworm, but too many mealworms will put the kilos on and make them lazy.
Which I think is common, isn't it, for all the parrot finches, that they've got a tendency to maybe be a bit overweight if they're overfed. I didn't think you really needed to feed them any live food, but I guess you've got other birds that need it. Yeah.
I don't think it's a necessity. I feed it because I produce so many maggots for all my other birds, and I just give it to them, and they relish them. They don't last long. All year round. Yeah. Yeah. With your birds, like if they want to have a break, they'll have a break. I try and force them. They'll still try and breed. Through winter, I tend to feed an oil mix just to stop any egg binding. But haven't had any issues so far.
My memory with both the tricolours and blueface, and I don't know if it's true for the red, is the big green food eaters really love green food. Is that true? Yeah, I would have thought that all the parrot finches did. Even when I've seen them in the wild, in Fiji and Bali and various places where you see them around the resorts and whatever, where you go, the whatever they're called, not the ones we've got, the peels and so on. Yeah. It's you go and have a look what they're eating. You think, what are they eating? There's actually no seeds. It's all sort of green food and stuff that they're feasting on.
From my experience, tricolours tend to get fat if they're confined in a short flight, and they got too much canary seed through the mix. So with a tricolour blowing its belly, you'll see the yellow fat, and obviously that affects your fertility in the birds. Even the red-faced, our pigs, they just keep eating too. So it's very important not to make sure there's too much canary there.
Yeah, Joe's just saying at the back that they're gluttons, so overeat, so they sort of need to be in big flights or manage their diet. Hang on, I'll come up, Brian, and give you the microphone. Otherwise, you're talking to nobody apart from not that the people in the room are nobody, but you know what I mean.
I'm just interested to hear that comment about the canary. That I've had tricolours and blueface, and I've had them with pinch mix and ad lib canary as much as they can eat. Never had any trouble with weight, but my aviaries are a fair bit bigger, so I think it's to do with how much exercise they can get and whether they burn off the calories or not. So I think the smaller the aviary, the more careful you've got to be with canary seed and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, my memory, particularly the blue face, was they were probably about 4 metre by 4 metre aviaries. How the hell they managed to get fed, I do not know, because every time I looked at them, they were zooming around like jet fighters, never stopped. So how the hell they put on weight, I don't know.
I would say that with red faces, once they start breeding, keep them breeding, and you never have to worry about them getting fat. Years ago, the first pair I got, I bred about 24 from them the first year, and people said, "Didn't you give them a break?" No, once you give them a break, they eat too much and they put on fat. Just let them breed, and then you've got no worries at all. But the old saying is a good pair makes you look good, yeah, and that's the big thing too. You get a lot of birds who are only just moderate pairs. Nothing you do will improve them.
Thanks, Paul. Perhaps, David, do you want to explain how you, your aviaries and how you keep them?
Yeah, my aviaries are 2 meters by, I think it's 6 or 7 meters long, 2.4 high. So I don't do reds. I prefer the blue face and the tricolored. They're nicer to me. I think the red's too dumpy looking. It's not sleek and slim like the others. Anyway, that's just my own opinion. Live food, yes, I give maggots, but because it's a mixed collection, I also have mealworms, but I've never seen any of the parrot finches get overweight. I think it's the, as said before, it's the size of the aviary that is the issue there. If you have more flight room and they fly, they will keep their weight down. Now, what I did is I initially put 5 pairs of each together, blue face in one aviary, tricolors in another. I found that's the best way to breed them. That number, I had about 40, 50 blue face off them and about 30 to 40 tricolors in 1 year. I do stop them in winter, give them a break. But you know, to me, that's been the easiest way to do it. If you have less birds, like this year, I've only got 3 pair of tricolors. I just dropped them down. I've only had 3 babies this year, and dropped down the blue face this year, and I've had a lot less, lesser than like, you know, you do your 3 pair breeds this, so therefore, sorry, 5 pair breed this, therefore 3 pair should breed that. I got less than that even. So I find that the bigger number actually stimulates them to breed, and you know, it works. So have dropped down and likely to stop breeding them next year because I want to do other stuff.
Do you keep any single pairs?
No, I don't have single pairs, all in colonies.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I, certainly with the tricolours, but I think that was in the days, in fact, I was just talking over supper, when they sort of first became prominent again, which is, what would it be? I don't know, is it probably over 10 years ago now? Is it maybe 15 years? I'm not really sure, but doesn't seem that long ago, but it probably was that long ago, when they were super expensive. And then I remember thinking, hang on, I'm not paying $1,500 for a pair of them. And then they came down to about, I forget what I paid, $700 or $800 for a pair of tricolours, and thought, okay, I'll get a pair. And I got 1 pair, and they bred, but of course, by the time I bred them, they were now worth $100 a pair, $90 a pair or something. But they were in, you know, aviaries in my barn. I've got sort of 4 metre by 4 metre aviaries, sort of the height of the American barn. And I just had them 1 pair. Of course, there are, you know, maybe 5 or 6 different species, but 1 pair of each, and they bred like mad. But look, to be honest, it was 1 pair as beginner's luck. Yeah, a lot of the time you get 1 pair and put it in, they sit there and look at you 5 years, don't they? So more luck than good management, I suspect. So that's interesting that colonies are a good idea. Anybody else want to mention some stuff? What haven't we talked about, Brian?
Medication, so
Yep.
worming.
There we go. Well, Brian, hang on, Brian's
Yeah,
going to
go,
have a
Brian.
shot too.
What are we, I can't remember what we're up to, but are we talking about tricolours yet? Tricolour parrot finches? I'm looking at Sam. I got rid of all my parrot finches because I was worried about, because I had an aviary with singers, and I get 3 young singers in the nest, and when the chicks are 3 days old, they disappear. And after about 3 months of that, I disappeared the parrot finches, and then I had young singers. So I'm just talking to Joe about that. He reckons there's a road cock, but I didn't take the risk. I got rid of all of them. So I'm venturing to add some parrot finches back into the aviary. But I'm going to do it very cautiously. So I don't know whether anyone else has had such an experience. But I'm a bit wary of parrot finches and cup nesters in the same aviary. And they had plenty of maggots, but they prefer young singers, in my opinion.
But did you breed lots of parrot finches when you weren't breeding any singers? I'm interested to know. Jason, you were going to start talking about medication. were you? Thank you.
Medication, I find in my experience, especially with redface over the years ago, was they're quite susceptible to pick up worms because they spend a lot of time on the floor. So worming routine is fairly important, obviously, and in wet environments, obviously baycocks as well.
You sort of where they come from in the wild is generally sort of, much more tropical areas. You would think that they would be sort of a little more resistant to worms and coccidiosis and stuff, but it doesn't always seem to be the case, does it?
Found when I did coccidiosis for all my birds, I did it to the amount you're supposed to put in, but I found that if I have young parrots in the nest, they'll die because it's too strong. So I sort of dosed it down for them. But my fear was the other birds in that aviary will not get fully cleared of cocci if I drop it down. But that's the problem. And even young birds out of the nest, when you do it, if they're just young, you can lose them. At least I was losing them when I did the cocci for them.
In the early days, when we had 5 or 6 varieties of parrot finches, we found they were susceptible to worms, all of them, but we used the wormers that were available in the day, and we'd always lose the young ones and often lose the hens, right? And some of the worm out gel, I think's got it on, and one of the others says, don't give it to parrot finches because they're very susceptible to the wormers. But we lost all the peels because of worms, I think, either because of the worms or because we wormed. So the limited numbers we had all of a sudden went to 0. And I think the same now. If you have to worm them because you lose them if you don't. But if you overworm them, you knacker yourself as well.
Yeah, just two questions, Bob. One, perhaps you can give us a bit of background on when the peels were here, because I don't remember them being in Australia at all. I know they were. And the second one, I've got a feeling that people said to me the problem with the worming stuff, particularly the worm out gel, was not so much that the worming stuff was killing them, was that they weren't drinking any, they just hated the stuff so much they never even touched it. So they basically died of thirst. But whether that's true or not, I don't know.
That's also possible. I know when we started to treat them though, so the old days of treating birds used to be when they start to look unwell is when you treated them. If they looked healthy, you left them alone, so you're already on a pretty steep decline. The genetic material was pretty slack anyway, because we didn't have a million of them to play with. So they were probably quite weak. But within probably 12 months, there was 5 or 6 of us that had fairly good numbers, and we just all dropped them all over the place. So that was the end of them on that tour anyway. So it's like the tricolours, 15 years ago, there was no such thing in Australia, right? And somebody mysteriously found some being bred by an old lady in Blacktown or something. And they bred in very, very big numbers. But they all based on, I think it was 18 birds. So be aware, guys, one day it's going to come full circle and you're going to run out of genetic material like we've done a million times with species, right? You have to work together, even though you think they're safe, and I commend you on trying to keep the reds pure. The last 5 years I've been trying to get reds, and every time I breed them, I'll throw a pied or I'll throw a sea grain or I'll throw something. You've got to work together though to keep them pure and to keep them sufficiently unrelated. Don't change your pairs just because you think, well, this is brother and sister, so I'll get a fresh one. because instantly you start to condense this gene pool and they'll all be related to one another.
I agree with that. You just got to keep your eye on your birds as they produce. And first sign of white feathers, if you're trying to breed pure lines, strip them out, move them on.
But Paul, were you saying earlier that the pieds, the beak, you reckon you can, is that probably the defining feature?
As soon as they've left the nest, the true pieds will be full yellow beaks, while the ones what are going to be normals will have a little black line along the beak. The other thing I was going to say about worms, everybody thinks that the only sort of worms you get are roundworms. Well, with finches, the gizzard worm is the biggest one. They're a really fine worm, or threadworms, and you get those because you're feeding live food. And also those ones have an intermediate host. So you don't necessarily kill them all. What you're doing when the insects, say cockroaches, pick up that egg and digest it, it starts growing in there and the birds get that, and it's really hard to move. So often the worms finches get are not the same as the worms parrots would get. And roundworms quite easy to get rid of, but gizzard worm and threadworm and tapeworm, they're a lot harder, and you really have to identify them so that you know what you've got. Because I'm trying to think of what the word is, the time from when the egg hatches to when it reproduces itself, when it's grown, it's quite long. So if you only give them a dose of worming in 7 days, you've probably missed it. So it's quite a hard thing that with worms.
Gizzard worm, you know your bird's not well with it. None of us really use the vets enough because it's too dear, but we treat them for worms. Gizzard worms, if they got a lot of them, and all the worms, in fact, they compact. So when the bird's trying to get rid of them, they all compact in the like the intestine area at the back, and they die just because they're not managing to get rid of their waste, right? But you should change your wormers. I know Cydectin's the best stuff we've had for a long, long time, but it shouldn't be your only wormer, right? So you need to change it occasionally because you'll get this resistance, particularly if you're doing, like you say, David, where you go a little bit reduced rate because you're worried about killing them, then you create a resistant parasite if you're not careful.
So the Cydectin Plus that the Finch Club sells, and that I think is kind of the standard wormer. So it's moxidectin and praziquantel, and I can't quite remember which worms are killed by which drug. Perhaps someone else can tell me. Sorry, Joe's got something to say.
I got a fair few parrot finches, and I rotate with Avitrol and Cydectin Plus. Avitrol, if you mix it up the way they tell you to at 30 ml per litre, next day you will find all your parrot finches dead on the floor. I mix it up at 5 ml per litre in summer for 3 days, and I've never lost a parrot finch. Wintertime comes when it's cooler, I'll mix it up at 7 ml per litre for 3 days. But then you got to rotate, so that way the worms don't get immune to one or the other. But I go with Cydectin Plus and Avitrol. But the Avitrol, you mix it up the way I tell you, and you won't have a problem with it.
Actually,
I can't remember the drug that's in Avitrol. Maybe, sorry, David.
yeah, I actually found it's with the Bocox, with the Coxie, doing that. That's where I found I was losing them, not with the worming. So slightly different. But when I used the amount on the bottle, then especially in the nest, the babies would die. But yeah, and even some of the adults, young adults would also die. So, that's what I found. So I'm interested in the worming because I never lost them on that. It was on the Coxie.
Yeah, I've certainly lost birds when I've been lazy and not wormed, and then I suddenly worm an aviary, and I find that I lose a few. And I've always presumed, a bit like what Bob said, that they've had a big load of worms. It's killed them, blocked their digestive tract, and basically they can't poop. and they die. But I've got my chemistry professor here who's going to inform us about what the different drugs are about. I don't know. Do you know what's in Avitrol though? We'll see.
No, I was just saying to Sam that the moxidectin and moxidectin plus, the moxidectin plus has 2 active ingredients. The second one is prasanquatel, which kills the tapeworm, and I can't remember what the name of the other stuff is, but but no, the active ingredient. You got to look at the active ingredient when you're using medications. Are you sure? Prasanquatel. Well, moxidectin is a generic or general thing that kills most worms, and prasanquatel is the additive that kills the tapeworm. So if you haven't got prasanquatel in your worm stuff and you're using the sidectin, you're still at risk of having tapeworms. So just remember that if you buy stuff from the pet shop. And I don't know what's in Avitrol, but as Joe said, if you don't reduce the rate, you won't have too many. There you go.
Hang on, we got another. We've got the chemistry professor's professor now.
I worked for a mob called SmithKline in French, and their claim to fame is they make all these worming solutions for sheep and cattle and goats and horses. And we as a hobby decided that drenches made for sheep would be perfectly acceptable for birds. Right. So we spent a long time killing birds or sterilizing birds or doing lots of things to them until we came to a level which we found didn't kill them. So we used that for a while and we found they didn't breed. So we reduced the quantity again and found that it did kill the worms and they stayed alive and they bred. So that's what we settled on. So if anybody's got old bottles in their fridge, it's sometimes we used to put 2 mils per liter. Then we said it was 3 mils. Then other people tell you to use 5 mils. It's meant for sheep, right? So take it for what it's meant as. Nobody yet has made a drug, to my knowledge, that's specifically for birds. Avitrol and moxidectin and all the rest, they bottle it off into smaller doses and sell it for other creatures, right? And it suits us because there's no better alternative. But all of these dectins, they're called, so moxidectin, abamectin, carbendazoles, they're all a group of chemicals that were developed to kill worms in livestock. And you'll be interested to know, so those people that may keep sheep and goats and the like, it's now ineffective in those animals because the bug has become resistant to those things. And the same thing will happen with us, right? We need to mix them up a little bit so that we keep the bugs away. Sam made the point, all the things in the wild that got cocci, all the things in the wild that got worms. The difference with those is they get their natural remedies. They know to go and eat kale and clay, or they know to go and do something that makes their system better. You know, we've got them in we think we're great, that we give them a mixed diet, but we give them nothing like what they're capable of getting when they're up and around on the floor, right? So we can only do with what we, the best we can do, but be cautious with overdosing because you'll kill them or you'll still alive.
Hang on, the professor's got to ask the professor a question.
I was just going to ask, I was just thinking of like the Finch Club, we happily sell Baycox and moxidectin plus. Is there a risk in only using Baycox, and is there an alternate we should be using?
No, because the Baytrix and things like that are the same product.
So does that mean there's no risk of developing resistance from the? So what do we use to fix that? Well, we haven't got an option at the moment.
It's made for pink eye in pigs. So it's got no resemblance to anything like coccidiosis, But that's what the canary guys think is a good solution, right? If you overdose it, you kill them all. If you slightly overdose it, you sterilize them all. And from what I can work out, it doesn't do them any good anyway. So Baycock's the best we have today.
And we just wait for the next option.
Righto. With Baycox actually kills the pathogen, but the majority of, let's say, pigeon breeders don't use that. They use one which just stops them reproducing. And the same thing occurs with poultry. They vaccinate them against cocci by giving it to them, and they build up a natural resistance. But with finches, they're pretty weak. They're pretty weak, and they don't live long enough to build up that resistance. But stronger birds will. And you just sort of keep the numbers down to where they can handle it.
Yeah, Paul's right. There was, when we were looking at Baycox, you know, with the sales table, there is another product that's used by pigeon. I can't remember the chemical name, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than Baycox, but it's not, it's more of a preventative sort of thing. Whereas Baycox, they take the recommended dose and it kills whatever coccidiosis is in them, it kills them. And I think that other drug, maybe David's remembered it, is also in like turkey starter and things. I don't think it's in chick starter, but it says it's got a coccidiostat in it. And there's various, you know, should you use that or shouldn't it? Some people say, well, maybe it's a good thing. Some people say, no, it's a bad thing in terms of for our birds, including parrots, you know, because a lot of people feed chick starter or there's that black label Finch crumbs now. David was going to say something, I believe. No. Well, maybe we need a vet to come at some stage too.
One thing we haven't covered yet is sexing those 3 species.
Yes, good idea.
Um,
DNA. Instead some feathers off.
Tricolour's easy. They look very different.
The tricoloured parrot finch is dead easy, of course. The cocks, like the one that came up on the screen before, is very dark blue. The hens are a much lighter blue. It's dead obvious. What about the other 2?
red face, obviously the head, the width of the head, the color break behind the eye for a hen, the bigger crown, deeper crown for the cock. You can vent sex when they get to a certain age, sex like a canary. Blue face, I never really tried sexing like a canary before. Bob?
I think they're quite obvious to tell apart. I think if you hold 2 of them in your hand, they are obviously different. One's brighter than the other. Maybe they look the same, but once you catch them, they look different.
Well, for the blue face, I've always just looked at the mask. I think for most hens, it's obviously smaller than the cock. I think is that. Hang on, we got the experts here. Or if you're a bird dealer, it's, well, what do you want them to be?
No, I'm not a bird dealer. But even with the blue face, if you look at their bodies, the males are more emerald green and the females like a dirtier green. You'll see it when you put 2 colored birds together and they're a cock and hen, you'll see it will stand out straight away.
What about the red face?
The red face, I tell by the mask, size of the mask, the color of the mask, and even their tail on when you look at the back of their tail, the males are more darker on the brown bit where they go to nearly a black, where the females just stay a light brown color on the tail. Even their body color as well. The males are more emerald green, where the females are just a green.
Sorry, that comment wasn't direct. I think, Ben, we were talking about sexing red-faced parrot finches, weren't we? A certain bird dealer who's passed away, who was well known for his antics. I think he sexed how many of yours?
I sexed 2 of mine. His response was 2's a pair.
Oh, I thought weren't you telling me about, didn't he sex, you know, about a dozen or something and said that, that was Justin.
That was Justin.
There you go, Justin, you tell your story then.
I can tell the story.
About the red face.
Yeah, he came to my place and a few years ago now. And he said, I'm going to separate your red face finches, you know, parrot finches. So he come in and we had that little divider, little black cage there. He took them all out and when he put the first 12 and he said, now these are the hens on the left-hand side. Went back in, got another 14, he thought were cocks, put them back, put 'em on the right-hand side. And then about after a minute, he said the left ones, remember, they're the cocks. What was the gentleman's name? We're not going to say his name.
Shouldn't spread over, but I'm sure there's a few people who would know who we're talking about. Hang on, I better get the camera back, his camera. Hang on, Brian Birch. Now, don't forget you're online, so no 4-letter words.
Pinoclean in his water to worm them as well.
Hang on, he put Pinoclean in his own water and the bird's water,
There's water.
and that was to worm them. And did any of them survive?
They all survive. They all survive.
That is, I have been told that by the pigeon guys, that they do that.
Well, pigeons aren't finches, though. Well, I'm not advising anyone to put
But
Pinoclean in their bird's water, but you know, I guess the old guys did stuff that we wouldn't do these days. Anyone else got any other thoughts on parrot finches? Has anyone had any experience with the pintails in Australia? Hang on, we're back to the, well, he's not using his chemistry profession at the moment. Back onto birds. Thanks, Bob.
Right, tricolours, we got them out of Adelaide in the pintos. We got them out of Adelaide in the 60s. They'd all been bred by a little old lady at Broken Hill. We had about 40 birds, and they died one at a time, and we were feeding them wild rice, soaked rice, any sort of soaked seed. And we ended up with like 4 birds left, I think, out of the 40. The second lot came in through West Australia fairly recently, from a little old lady who bred them in Broken Hill. And I think they're going okay, I think. I think they had origins in New Zealand, actually, who have been breeding them for a while.
Oh, that's good if they do get established. I know in Europe there are, well, quite a number of the species that are rolling around in the background here are reasonably secure overseas. I believe that most of them are probably fostered out, but still, it's keeping them going in captivity in Europe. Except that they've got major problems with the animal rights nutters, and particularly between issues in the Netherlands, but particularly in the UK since Brexit. That they're not able to move birds very easily at all. Absolute disaster between the UK and Europe. So that's really buggering up agriculture in that part of the world. Yeah, hang on while I give you the mic.
The other bird that comes up is the Mount Catalan or Cataglan parrot finch. Always looks like the first hybrid between a red and a blue face. There's a real strong train of thought that it is actually a hybrid between the red and the blue that's somehow established in the islands. So, you know, we always say that the hybrids are mules, you know, they're sterile, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe some of them, like siskins, maybe the odd one is fertile, right? So I know in Fiddler's book, he thinks they're a hybrid. You know, so that's how they came about. And the Papuan parrot finch, there was a guy in Queensland for many years that was breeding the blue face with hardly any blue in it. He didn't believe they were Papuan. He just thought it was like a mutation, but we assumed it was the Papuan race that he had.
I remember when some time ago, I can't remember the details, but I believe the difference, the way that people tell, the size of the beak is noticeably larger in the Papuan than the blue face. I think maybe longer. I can't quite recall whether it was longer or broader, but one or the other was the sort of more fairly obvious feature, but also the lack of blue in the face as well. Any other?
The Australian blue face is quite readily still observed in certain locations in Cape York at the moment too. So.
Brian's just got one comment on the Macdons again.
So on. we just haven't mentioned it, but moxidectins, as Sam calls them, moxidectin, as well as controlling worms, of course, it controls mites as well. And that's something that if you've got any mite problems, just keep that in the back of your mind. It's not just a worming product.
Yeah, so I presume it gets in their bloodstream, and then if the mites, obviously are blood-sucking insects, they get zapped by it. The other thing, I believe, the original was it maybe that avermectin and also ivermectin were the older versions of moxidectin. Talking to Stacey Gallis and some of the vets, the reason that the Cydectin, which is the brand name from Verbac's brand name, the reason that they've changed to moxidectin, both for sheep and for throughout the whole thing, is that it's a much safer drug. It still kills the parasites and so on just as well, but it's a much safer drug. And in fact, according to Stacey, you can, not that we're advising you to do it, you can actually use a much higher dose without risk. But praziquantel is you got a problem with praziquantel. Yeah, they're the trade name. Cydectin's the trade name, and the actual name is moxidectin of the drug. I say, yeah, well, there's a number of trade names: Cydectin, eQuest, ProHeart, and Quest. But I mean, I think the same moxidectin is used. I think it might even be in some products for worming horses and cattle and probably dogs and cats too. Certainly that family would have. Anyone else got any other? Hang on, Barry's going to say something.
The age of the parrot finches.
Oh, about that in a bit more. Hang on, the experts are going to tell us. Right, 5 or 6 years, we're saying. They probably do they breed for a fair while? I would have thought compared to other birds, probably pretty good actually. Would that be right? I think they probably breed for a few more years than like some of our wax bills and things that tend to do really well, first and second year. You've had them for a while, Paul. Or what? Do yours breed for a fair while?
Look, I'd say they start to decline after about 3 years. They go down. So where you're getting, say, 4 to a nest, by the time they're 5 years old, you'll be lucky to get 1 from a nest. That's like all those finches, they breed for 5 years and live for about 7 or 8. And you keep on trying to work out what I'm doing wrong, but it's not you. They just don't breed.
I guess that's why it's so good to join a club, isn't it? So that you get to know the honest people, so that when you buy your birds, you're buying they're young birds rather than potentially if you don't know the people, you might be buying their 5-year-old parrot finches that have past their prime. What are they worth? I don't know. Let's see.
Pure reds. I've seen them going as high as 150, 160 a pair. Average price would be around that 100 mark. Tries, I think, have come down quite a fair bit. They're quite similar, 90 to 100, maybe up towards that 110. Blue face, $40 a pair.
Not really sure why blue face is so much cheaper. For some reason, people are not. They've never been as popular as the other two. I don't know why.
The reason is because, when you do the year list, you keep them at that price, you put them up.
It's a bit like the government. I was talking to people, who run businesses about, the consumer price index. It gets yelled around on ABC radio and on the news that, what is it running at, inflation's running at 7.8% or whatever it is they come up with next. And anybody who runs a business, when they look at their prices, they go, oh, hang on, inflation's at 7.8%. We better at least put our prices up by that much, and then we'll whack another bit more on. We better at least go up by sort of 9 or 10 this year just to keep in front. So it's a bit like that, is it? So what we need to do, because Ben's breeding way too many red face, so we put the price down. And blue face aren't popular enough, so we put the price up and everyone want them. Remember that when we do the price guide this year. Any other thoughts? Well, hang on. I'll come around, Bill.
This is just a general comment that maybe someone else can comment on. You all know Bob Wright, and Bob Wright's got a lot of tricolours, and he's got a big aviary. And the other day we were in the aviary, and there's tricolours and Goulians, black-headed Goulians. Lo and behold, flying around that had crept out without us knowing was a white bird. It's not a Goulian. It's a white bird. It can only be a tricolour because the tricolours were attending to it as a fledgling. And on the upper tail coverts, there's a little red spot. In fact, when we first saw it, we thought it had been victimized by another bird or something, and we thought it was blood. But in actual fact, it wasn't blood. It's red feathers. Anyone had any experience with tricolours?
Where were the red feathers?
On the upper tail coverts. You only ever saw them when it flew. There was this little dollar red spot. And it's as happy as Larry. And we can only assume that it's come from the tricolours because it was the tricolours that were hovering around it as a young'un. So I don't know. Oh, but we never ever saw the tricolours feeding it, but they were attending to it.
Paul's, I was wondering whether it had red eyes too, is what probably your question, but yeah.
It'll be albino, I say. Like on tricolours, they've got a little red spot on them, the blue ones. So in an albino, it's changing the blue to white. A Lutino changes the green to yellow, but they still retain the red. And it'll be the same thing with that bird, I'd say. I'd say it's a mutation. But it's, well, it's very valuable. Watch it. Tell Bob.
Yeah, we won't announce Bob's address then, hey, if it's a $1 million Bob.
When I mentioned earlier that the tricolours weren't here 15 years ago, 5 years ago, these mutations started happening, or 6, maybe a little bit longer. So you got that dilute, you got this Lutino. Very rarely do they make it to adulthood, but it's a classic example of inbreeding when you start throwing mutations. You know, it's not through our cleverness, it's through our neglect that we throw mutations. We all make money at it because we think it's a great thing to, everybody will want this bird. We should wring its neck probably. But anyway, if I had it, I'd keep it going too, but it's not what we really want. We're losing the integrity of the bird.
From memory, you might remember better, Ben, when we were at Stanley's, I think his young dilutes were very, very, very light in the nest. So just perhaps it's a dilute, but anyway, it'd be interesting to hear what colour eyes it's got. Might be a defining feature. Well, no doubt Bob will be get a million phone calls in the morning. Ring him now if you like. Do you want me to give him his mobile? No, I'm sure Bob would love to explain. But anyway, we'll no doubt we'll get some more photos of it to present here at the next meeting. That'd be the go, I think. Anybody else want to add anything else about Parrot finches, or will we draw that to a close then, I think, unless anyone's got anything desperate to say? Thank you very much to Ben and Jason and David and everybody else who contributed. That was good, I think. Quite a few good tidbits. So we've actually recorded this meeting for YouTube. There might have been some things that were said that maybe we need to edit out. I'm not sure, but we'll review it first before we make it public. Now, what am I supposed to do? We just got to do the raffle. Is that it? I think so. So we might then say goodbye to the people online, and we'll close the Zoom meeting, and then we'll go straight into the raffle. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.